Welcome to The Bridge. Fun conversations on culture, life, and everything in between.
Welcome to The Bridge. We are a show that connects East and West. My name is Jason. I am originally from California, but now I am living in beautiful Wuhan, China. Today with me is BeiBei.
Hey, hi, Jason.
I want to pay condolences to the children killed and the families affected by the mass shooting and tragedy at the elementary school in Texas in the United States of America. This episode was recorded and produced before this tragedy, but it is time to say something instead of only saying enough is enough. 19 children and 2 adults were killed in the shooting at Robb Elementary School in Uvalde, about 85 miles west of San Antonio. Find us where you get your podcasts. If you like the show, then consider pushing the like button or giving us 5 stars. Suggestions, comments, anything you would like to share? Email us at welovethebridge@gmail.com. We love the bridge.
We have serious things to talk about today. Let's bring it on.
I want to title it something like, Are Mass Shootings Now Part of American Culture? Which is a sad thing. And the reason I bring it up in this way is because it's not just that there are shootings, but some of the statistics are frightening.
Okay, is that new? Because I know we've talked about this topic, but did you discover something new?
Well, I don't know if it's new to the world. It was new to me because I was always aware that, it seemed like every few weeks I heard about some kind of shooting. There was some statistics that really frightened me. I was on CNN.com. This came out at the end of last year, and it's called Mass Shooting Fast Facts. And they projected that there were about 3 mass shootings a day. So, we hear about them periodically every few weeks or every month. They're in the news cycle, but I don't think people realize how common and everyday they are across the United States at this point.
I think years ago, at least pre-pandemic, we would hear about this every few years. Maybe it just didn't make it into the news so much. And there are a few of these cases that everybody knows, right? But over the past few years, it has become so frequent that, it's like people are almost used to hearing about it. But of course, that's not right. But it's becoming more frequent, and I'm not too sure if it's because of more reporting, more accessible information, or the number of cases are actually also going up. I think it's possible that's the case. It's probably going up because of, the economy not doing as well and the pandemic and just people struggling.
There were an increase since about 2020, 2021. There increased not only in anti-Asian hate crimes, but there's also an increase in mass shootings. So yes, you're absolutely right. That prediction turns out to be well-founded. And in fact, there are more mass shootings now than ever before. And it's accelerated just recently.
Okay. Where do you guys, your parents, they still live in California?
My mom,
Los Angeles?
My mom lives in the Central Valley, which, and there are lots of guns there, but it's, I don't feel like where she lives is one of the places that this is going to happen. But you never know. I guess this could happen anywhere. I think a lot of people are very surprised by suddenly this is in their backyard. This is in their community. And this is happening to community after community where people didn't expect this to happen. And it's just showing up everywhere.
I'm pretty sure I said this in the show before, but for all those years that I lived in the States, I never really thought about it. There were, of course, the school shootings that we heard about. But that's major news. It's not something I related into everyday life. But it's been over a decade since I left. I go back to visit. I didn't really think about it. It's been already 3 years since I went back. But now I think about it, I'm pretty sure that our neighbors where we lived, they probably have guns because they were police officers. So, they were sane people who use guns as, protection. And I heard that I have a cousin there in the States, in another state, and he has 1 or 2. He's into that kind of stuff. He thinks it's he views this as a piece of artwork. But also, for self-protection. He lives in Maryland, and somehow he thinks that it's it's safer. It never really made sense to me how having guns make things safer, because I feel like it just makes things worse, because someone has a gun and then other people feel like they have to have guns to protect themselves. But it's not really very good protection. Hopefully you scare other people off, but then you're probably within shooting distance anyway. So I just don't feel good about this.
And and also, like, if they are truly mentally deranged, which if you run into a mall and start shooting people, obviously you're not mentally healthy. If you have a gun, maybe you can kill that person, but still they're going to keep shooting at you whether you have a gun or not. So like it's just more people with guns shooting at other people. I also don't feel like the solution is more guns. That's my opinion. I'm not trying to berate anyone with different opinions, but it doesn't feel like filling the country to the brim with guns and giving guns to school teachers is going to solve the fact that the reality. Because that is a talking point among people who love guns. Let's give guns to all the school teachers. Then if one of the students goes crazy, this teacher can shoot the student, which is insane. Like in my opinion.
Oh my gosh, that is. Anyhow, since we've talked about this a few times, I thought a little bit more about gun control, because I think the last few times we talked about this, we sort of ended where, we said it's a great problem, but we can't find a solution. Right? It's like nobody has really found a great solution for this problem in the United States. And then when I thought more about it, I realized that it's not that this problem can't be solved. It's because of the system the country is in, right? Because of the system in which people, they can't agree to solve this problem together. Because if it's just the gun problem, don't you think there is a solution, right? If we have less guns, let's say we buy them back or use some other ways to pull them off the society. That is a solution, right?
I agree.
So it's not that we don't have a solution. It's that we can't agree to solve this problem together. Now, because in that culture, in that society, some people consider guns as a problem. Like a lot of people having guns as a problem. But then another segment of the society, groups, they think that having guns is a freedom that people should have. So there you go, right? You can't make people agree that this is a problem we need to tackle together.
Yeah.
Because once you agree, you can solve this problem. So that goes to the inherent flaw of Western democracy. I know I'm touching on a sensitive nerve for a lot of people, but I'm just really expressing my own thought, own logic behind my thinking. Because supposedly in that system, everyone's rights should be fully respected. Yeah. And they all have influence in a way. I mean, I'm saying idealistically, right? They should all have the rights to influence political decisions. But in reality, it's the political policies that you favor might be far from being implemented, right? Even if the one you voted for actually becomes the president. And also, when it comes to rights, personal rights, they often conflict. Right? I have the right for this and you have the right for that. And they don't always agree. So I think, what's the solution? Right? This is an inherent flaw of that whole system. And I was thinking how the same thing would go here in China. And I was thinking, if, let's say, we are going to have a discussion on whether or not we have guns, we should have guns, or whether or not we should not have guns in China. Now, not a lot of people will be interested in whether or not we should not have guns, because it's like given, you know what I like? You don't need to convince most of the Chinese people that we should not have guns in a society.
Well, I think you're not only right about China, I think you're right about the vast, vast, vast majority of countries around the world. Like, you don't see, like, people in France, like trying to get guns into everyone's hands, or Italy, or like Norway or Germany, or this is a very uniquely American problem. And you look at all of the other developed countries around the world, and people are not running around like cowboys shooting each other, essentially. So I think you're right. This is a problem. there are legal ways to like solve this problem. The United States would have to have something called a constitutional convention where they would have to have an overwhelming majority of people to actually change the Constitution. So it is possible to actually change the Second Amendment, which is the one that allows people to have guns. But you're right. There's such a large divide politically that it's impossible to do that.
Right. And, I thought more about this, and especially, when it comes to China, I really appreciate one thing about China. And I think this makes a lot of things a lot easier, be it gun control or, let's say, people's attitude or values regarding drugs or like porn or anything that the society would consider so negative that like no more discussion is needed, right? And I think it really helps that in China, in the Chinese society, there is a cultural network that just about everyone is connected to because this cultural background or network was formed over like thousands of years. The values that this carries, it's like this net that offers nutrient and water consistently. But the root of all this was from the philosophy, the values that people have, believed in for a very, very long time. So there is a consensus in some of these basic values, right? For example, one is you put life first. In the States, people talk about human rights all the time. But then when certain things happen, it seems like other things takes precedent over the importance of life. In case of gun control, some people put freedom over safety and the value of lives.
You're right.
When it comes to the pandemic, it's the same thing. I think that's probably very obvious. It has become obvious, right, over the past few years. And in China, I think we take it a bit more literally, right? Because a lot of sacrifices have been made to make sure that, a minimum people would be affected by the pandemic through the disease. I mean, other areas of life will be impacted to make sure that the pandemic is under control. So there are real sacrifices that people make to put life first. And when I say life, it's not just people under 80 years of age, right? It's like life in all ages. Because at this stage of the pandemic, as from what I heard, right, the virus is a little bit weaker than at the beginning. And for most young people without basic health problems, things should be okay. But things are still under, control over here when it comes to pandemic because, hey, there are millions of old people.
Can I add to that?
And young people. Sure.
Because I 100% agree with you. Living here in China during this period and looking at Western media talking about China, I am so perplexed at like the poor level of journalism that exists in the West and their understanding of what China is trying to accomplish. And it is really like vexing. Don't understand giant media names. I don't know if I'm allowed to name them, but like huge names in media in the UK and America are completely dead wrong about so many aspects of what China is doing. Because, the United States, there is more than 1 million dead and there are 330 million Americans. And China has 1.4 billion people. So if China were to follow the same route that America did, we're talking about 4 to 5 million dead people. And somehow like mainstream media in the US is like, you should just let people live. No, what are you talking about? You're talking about you want to send 4 to 5 million people to their deaths so that you can go get a sandwich with no mask on or something. This is insane. I don't understand how they can say that they are the champions of human rights when they don't even let people live.
Right.
It's ludicrous in my mind.
So, I mean, even for us who have been living in China, I think we have a more realistic understanding of what putting life first means. Because, we have the same thing in Chinese, right? 生命第一. It's like you would, everything else has to follow that, right? That's the one in front of all the zeros in a way. And here they do put it into practice. But in that process, Are there sacrifices? Yes, there are. And a lot of times they are not pleasant ones, right? The medical workers have to work really hard. Like, I think there's some probably mass testing of what do you call it? The acid test or whatever?
The test.
Yeah, the test.
But yeah, I've been getting it like twice a week. It's not really that big of a deal. In my community, we go down, I'm standing in line, 15 minutes later, I'm back in my house. It's like not a really big sacrifice to save other people's lives.
Exactly. And your own, right?
Yeah.
So when it comes to, let's say, safety and putting life first, there will be some discussions as to how strict things should be, especially for, like, say, different cities and localities, because things can be a little different. But in general, like when it comes to these really important things, there are not as many conflicts and discussions in the Chinese society because people just understand.
Yeah.
And that understanding come from, I think partly at least come from the cultural networks. And in this culture, the basic values, you truly value life. And that means every life counts. Even if this life is over 100 years old, at the very beginning, there were patients over 100 years old and they survived the COVID-19 at the very beginning. And it was like, everybody was like celebrating it online. It was such a glimpse of hope, to know that someone over 100 years old could survive this virus. And of course, she went through the treatment, right? In the hospital under professional, with professionals. And also another basic value that over 1 billion people share is we value community and unity over individual needs. Now, of course, not in the extreme sense, right? We live our lives as normal people do. But when it comes to special times like this, you give in a little bit of your freedom. Like you give in half an hour of your time to get a test, right? So we make sure that we screen out people who are positive. That's the sacrifice you make. Is it a big deal? I mean, it can get a little annoying, but it's not that big a deal, right? So that you don't need to spend a lot of time convincing people to go get tested. And also something else that contributed to this, I think it goes back to the root of all these values, and that is ancient Chinese philosophy. And I'm not too sure how, into philosophy you are, because I know you love to read too.
I have a minor in philosophy.
Really? Okay, but Western or other parts?
That's strange. You mentioned that. I did notice when I was in university that all the philosophy, like the philosophy classes were about Westerners. So yeah, I have studied some since I've got here. I've read the Tao Te Ching a few times, and I've read the Art of War a couple of times, and I've read about Confucius, but not as much as I should have probably.
I've read just a little bit, like the introduction, because it gets really difficult, especially the Chinese text. But something I've noticed, I took like one course in Western philosophy, and it was a lot about being logical, right? It was a lot about thinking straight, have a very clear mind. But when I started reading Chinese philosophy, it was basically all about what humans should be like. Discussions on what humans should be, how humans should act on our own and in relation to other people. Now, it's a very clear difference, like a different focus. Like in Chinese, no matter if it was the Confucianists, the Taoists, the Buddhists, and also the legalists and other, categories, they were all concerned about how we should be and how we should behave. So you do see the emphasis here?
Yeah, when I was reading Mengxius, a lot of that is exactly what you're talking about.
Right.
Or Mengzi.
Right, exactly, Mengzi. So these ancient sages, they spend all this time, I don't know, sitting by a river or in a cave somewhere. I'm not too sure. But they thought long and hard about what we should be like, what an ideal human being and an ideal or closer to ideal human society should be like. And these are very applicable. Is that right?
Yeah.
Like they can be applied into everyday living, even to this day. And their influence have, carry over even to this day. It's not so much about how to think about each individual action, whether or not it's logical or things like that. It's really about how to be. It's for example, we all have the term saints, right? In both Western culture and Chinese culture. In Chinese, it's called 圣人. That's called saints. Now, this term in Chinese culture though is non-religious. When we say, because saints, I think in Western culture, that's people are almost like they're not human, right? They're like almost supernatural in a way.
Yeah, because they have to, in Catholicism, they're supposed to perform 3 miracles.
Ooh, okay. But the saints in Chinese culture, they are humans. But they're humans with such more high moral standards that they're considered like above normal humans. They're respected for how they behave, how benevolent and how kind and understanding they are to other people. So that is our understanding of saints. And there are famous saints as emperors. They are respected even to this day because of, how considerate they were of their own people, how they governed and how they lived their own lives. And these saints have been, in a way, idols in the Chinese society all throughout history. And it's very important, especially as I'm, raising a kid on my own, for the society to have, I won't say the right idols, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Right? There's no one type of idols. But who are the heroes, the idols, the saints in a society? And that has a huge influence on a society's culture. And you can talk. I'll go grab a book because I want to share that book with you a little bit later.
Well, I actually want to talk a little bit about something that's tragic in relation to this and bring it around. So I want to quote another statistic that I read in preparing for this, and that is that guns have become the leading cause of death among children and teens in 2020. So since the year 2020, like vehicle crashes, drug overdoses, cancer, any kind of disease you can think about, they are now second or third or fourth. And it's not suicide, it's homicide. So we're talking about children killing other children is as a consequence of like the gun laws and the way that this is being allowed to grow disproportionately out of control. I feel like Americans have to come to a reckoning and realize that this is happening. And, you're talking about ancient philosophy and how
still relevant.
Yeah. And how it borrows from its own culture and history. And I think you do make very, very good points that the American system is very young and the American system has a lot of excessive amounts of pride about its system and trying to force other people to adopt it when the reality is they have a lot of refining left to do.
Right. And it gets very confusing because no one really likes being forced, anything to be forced upon them. I think we all know that our own systems are not perfect given any country, right? I don't think any country has found the perfect way of organizing humans, human societies. But even if changes have to be made, it's made internally, right? Because we know the details. And it's been very odd for other people to keep telling you, you got it wrong. Hey, we have the right way of doing things. It's like, I don't know. It's just this action itself it's just seemed very odd to us. And also the book I wanted to mention, since we were talking about philosophy, it's named Taking Back Philosophy, a Multicultural Manifesto. And it's by Professor Brian W. Van Norden. And in very, very early episodes of The Bridge, like last year, we talked about this book a bit. And in this book, as you mentioned, when people study philosophy, let's say in the university in the United States, it's mostly Western philosophy, as if that's the only philosophy that exists. Well, in fact, that is, it's one slice of the pie, but it's not like the whole chunk.
You're absolutely right.
There are so many other categories of philosophy. There's Asian, of course, and African and South American. People live in different areas, have different environment, different cultures, but they all think about how to live our lives. And they have maybe different takes. But I think we all agree that we think about this so that people can live better lives, right? So this book is telling people that we need to start paying attentions to how other people, the wisdom from other cultures. I mean, on Amazon, I want to talk a little bit about this book. This introduction of Taking Back Philosophy is asking, are American colleges and universities failing their students by refusing to teach the philosophical traditions of China, India, Africa, and other non-Western cultures? So this biting and provocative critique of American higher education says yes. Basically, that's the case. And I think the American society and, the younger generation will benefit so much from opening up their minds to see how other people, the wisdoms from other cultures, and how they live, and just broaden the idea of philosophy.
Well, can I add to that?
So much more. Sure.
There's an academic work that is very popular among graduate students that called Provincializing Europe. And this book actually talks about exactly what you're talking about, that the United States, I guess Western. So he's talking about Europe and the United States. He often says Euro-American in the book, need to put down the recent tradition, the last century or two of traditions of only reading their own ideas and start looking around the world. And this is part of a movement called post-colonialism, which is actually very popular right now. And I think that the universities in the last decade or so are really going through some fundamental changes in how they represent, this is a very popular word right now, represent other cultures and other ideas. And a lot of departments at some of the best universities are only just now in the last 5-10 years really beginning to restructure some of their programs to include more global ideas. The problem with this is that it's late and that it's going to usually something like this takes a few decades before it impacts society deeply, because the most cutting edge ideas in a university take a while to diffuse to the general population. So while the smartest people and the most academic people, the most nerdy people, I should say, are really starting to realize that they need to reflect, back up, and branch out into the rest of the world, most people who are not academically minded are not going to see the effects of that for another generation.
And I think another problem that the American society has to deal with is that it has been so preoccupied with materialism, with financial success, like overwhelmingly preoccupied with this one aspect of human life, that it has not had a lot of time to think about the other aspects, right? The philosophical, the psychological, and the spiritual. I mean, I'm not saying it doesn't exist, right? They exist, but I think they could have play a greater part in more people's lives so that our lives get a little bit more balanced. We should spend time thinking about how humans should live instead of just thinking about what's the next thing I'm going to get or thinking about how much more money, can I make? These are important questions, but it can't be our only preoccupations. And I think that's one of the reasons why, I chose to come back to China, because I felt this preoccupation with money, with status, with just materialism, with glittering things, with fancy things, right? That I thought this just it's totally out of balance. And coming back to the question I asked earlier, who are the idols? Who are the heroes in a society? It's also the case that a lot of people in China, they not adore, but they think, they want to be the rich and successful. Yeah. Right. They want to be the madly rich and they want to get rich fast. A lot of people are like that. But then there are also other elements, mainstreams. We can also call maybe there are parallel mainstreams in the society where they also highly value and respect the idealistic, the passionate, people who can transcend materialism and people who can transcend individualism, for people who live for a greater purpose than just make sure they live a good life in this life. And there is true admiration and respect for people who are like that. Those are the heroes in the Chinese society. I mean, there are the idols and there are the heroes For example, like the taikonauts or Chinese astronauts who just came back, right? They are the heroes, very much respected in our society. And the same is probably true in the States. I'm not too sure if it's in this day and age. Astronauts.
I feel like astronauts are not as popular as they once were in the United States, which is really sad. But yeah, I'm really happy that the first female taikonaut is from Yantai, where my wife is from.
Yay.
Go Yantai.
Yeah, there's some details here. Yeah, so, I wanted to share that, maybe we should spend a little bit more time thinking about who are the heroes and idols of our society, because that's what our kids are going to look up to. If the idols are fancy, I don't know, like entertainment stars.
Yeah.
Wearing very little, but driving like cars covered with diamonds.
I completely agree with you.
And then they will think naturally that, that is a good life.
That's what society expects of me. If I want to succeed in this society, I need to look like that person on television.
But there's so many other choices. Yeah.
Who has like a 7-bedroom house with 3 swimming pools and 2 Jaguars. That should be me.
Wait, only 7?
Okay, sorry, 17. I forget what it's like to be in America.
Yeah. So I'm not too sure how we got from mass shooting to what we're talking about now, but I'm sure it's related somehow. I think I was talking about this cultural network that I find so helpful. And also, something that I didn't think about earlier, maybe like say a few years ago. Because in the past 4 decades, a lot of people were looking up to the Western, developed countries, right? How, people in the States lived. Wow, everyone has a single house with a nice yard and how they shop and eat.
Says Hollywood.
Yes, says Hollywood.
Says Hollywood.
Exactly.
But that's not the reality of the situation. Yeah.
Or, Western countries with their great mountains and ski resorts. That's what, people in China thought of Western developed countries. And of course, we looked up to that and wanted to be there. And now decades later, the living standards in China have gone so much higher that we are much closer to that. So now it doesn't feel like a stretch. And now at this rather special and confusing time in human history, we start to see another, not really a problem, but another situation where I seem to realize that in the States, the living standards have actually, they are in general, on average, much higher than most human need. There are a lot of waste going on. And then, we start to see deeper social problems or deeper mental problems that people have. Because in the past, we thought once you have enough money, once you are rich enough, you're all set. But now looking at what's been happening in, let's say, the United States and probably other countries, we realize that money can't solve all your problems. And if you've been going after wealth all the time, you're going to end up with some other problems that money can't solve.
You're right. There is a huge mental health problem in the United States. And I think it's not just related to finally gaining access, but there are a lot of really deep problems in American culture. You're talking about how media represents how people should be. And if you listen to a lot of music and watch a lot of movies and play a lot of video games, and I know a lot of people are going to be angry. Like there's a lot of violence in movies, in video games, in music, and the United States has something like, I don't know, 1,500 military bases around the world across 140 something countries. And like we spend $813 billion on the military a year at this point. I mean, I think, the way that the United States is managed generally across a lot of different fields shows that some of the quote unquote freedoms may not be good for people. And actually, the United States is really becoming a model of what is not an appropriate way and how a country should not be managed.
Oh, gee. I hope when you go back to the States, they can still allow you in. I don't want you to get stuck in an airport and think, oh, you are on the blacklist.
I'm not on a minority opinion here. There are tens of millions of other Americans who feel the same way, who also protest against a lot of these things and feel that the manner in which the United States is, manifesting itself these last 10, 20, 30, 40, even longer, depending on what we're talking about, years, is not an appropriate way for people to live. And so it's not just me.
It's actually out of the goodness in your heart, right? You want this country to be better.
Yeah, my family lives there. I'm concerned about them. Legitimately, I'm concerned about other Americans. When I meet Americans here in China, we make friends right away. We're immediately like, oh, hey, what's up, my American friend? And we usually connect based around Taco Bell or whatever. But it's not that I can't sit down and talk about this stuff in America with other Americans. It's just that the political will is not there. It doesn't exist. The way that the government functions is not suitable to addressing a lot of these problems.
And I think a lot of these problems go down to basic structures, some inherent structures of the Western democracy and the whole society. So just like gun control, you go down to the root of the problem, and you feel like that can't be solved, right? Because you're going to be, you can't agree on solving the problem. Whereas here in China, because of this, like people, when they think of China, they think, oh, they have a controlling government. So, they can get certain things done. It's not that. We can get things done. For example, we can pull our resources to build up infrastructure, and we can pull our efforts in trying to contain the pandemic, not because we have a controlling government. It's mostly because people are willing to cooperate. Even if you have a extremely controlling government, if the people are not cooperating, you're gonna have more trouble, right? You're gonna be fighting the people who are fighting you instead of fighting the virus or fighting guns. So here, the things work is because we pull our efforts together. We're willing to do this. Both the government and the people are willing to solve problems together. And I think that's why these things can be done, because there's such huge scale and it takes so much for things to move things in the right direction. If people are not saying yes and nodding and feeling like that's the right thing to do, it's going to be so chaotic. You can't even imagine it. So I think a lot of people got this wrong. Yeah.
You're right. Absolutely. 100% people got this wrong. What the mainstream media in the United States says about China is often a very gross misrepresentation of how China is functioning internally. And it's very frustrating that is the case. So actually, I want to quote a study done by Harvard. This was according to polling in July of 2020 from the Ash Center at Harvard's Kennedy School of Government. 95% satisfaction with the Beijing government exists among citizens. So this is not a poll conducted by China amongst its own citizens. This is a poll conducted by Harvard University, the best American university. And they are saying that 95% of Chinese people are overwhelmingly satisfied with the Chinese central government.
Right.
The same school from 2003 to 2016, Harvard's Kennedy School, also surveyed people based on provincial, township, and found during that time there was 93% satisfaction with the central government and 82% satisfaction with provincial governments in China. That America has never had at any administration enjoy that much overwhelming love from its people. So, you know, like what the mainstream media always tries to portray China as this like gloomy, dark place where the central government is making everyone do whatever they want. But if you come to China and talk to Chinese people that live here, they overwhelmingly do love what the central government is doing and how they are handling.
And they'll think what they say is ludicrous. Like, how big would a government be if you want to control everybody? Like, have people ever thought about that? It takes a lot of energy to control others, right? I mean, as a parent, I know this. And even a one-on-one is exhausting. Can you imagine trying to control over 1 billion people? Like, you will literally have this half controlling the other half. Or else, how do you get this done? You think you can just tell people to do this, do that, and then they will do it? People have their own wills, right? They have things they want to do. You need to... You can't force people to do everything. Either they want to do it with you, or, you know, they see the reasoning in why you want to do this and they choose to cooperate with you. That's your solution. It's not about forcing. Somehow, I think a lot of people think in China, the government forces people to do a lot of things. That's not how you work, because even if it is practically, it's not going to work. It's not going to work. You would literally have like 80% of the people controlling the 20%, or else it just can't be done. So please, guys, you know, think practically. You know, people are not easy to control. As I said, one important reason why it's easier for things to, for people to work together is because of this cultural network. You know, we grew up sharing these same basic values. We don't spend energy discussing whether or not we should have drugs or guns or porn, you know, out there. We don't want to spend energy talking about that. We have other practical matters to take care of. And when it comes to governing or governance, we want to leave the things, responsibilities that, you know, we can't handle on our own to the government. And, you know, we think they are the professionals, right? Like building roads, building schools, or international affairs. We don't want to deal with that, right? I'm busy living my life. You know, the government, you take care of that.
we just talk about this just from like a cultural perspective for a moment? We've talked about this before, and I think it needs to be pressed into people's minds that we're living outside of China. When we're walking around in China, even at night, even, you know, when there's no moon and like you're under a bridge, it's safe. Like you don't ever feel like my life is threatened because the community I am in is like, you know, not well off and people are going to take advantage of me. It just doesn't happen. Like muggings and that kind of stuff don't happen because people don't have guns and people don't have this culture of like, the culture is so different. And like the outlook on life is so different that these problems that exist so bad that it's become the number one like cause of death among teenagers and children in the United States. This doesn't even exist here at all.
Right. It's, as you said, we don't want to spend energy right? Basic issues like that. For us, that's like a basic issue. I mean, in Chinese news, if there is like a gunshot anywhere, like the whole country will probably know about it the next day or pretty immediately because someone will catch that on their cell phone, right, and post that online. And it's just, it's extremely uncommon. And and the thing is, we like it this way. You know, we understand that freedom, there should be limits to freedom. No, especially as parents, we know that, you know, freedom sounds like a great word, but if you cross the line, that could be your death. Seriously.
What's interesting, actually, you mentioned that. See, even in the United States, they have limits to freedom. So, for example, it is illegal to stand in an extremely crowded place and scream fire when there is, in fact, no fire. So, like, that technically, First Amendment protects your right to stand in an extremely crowded place, like a movie theater, for example, and scream fire when there's no fire, because you're going to cause people to get trampled and maybe someone will die.
Right.
And so this is illegal. So the problem isn't freedom, because, you know, I feel free here. Actually, let me give you some examples before I continue. I can walk around with like a beer in public and the police will see me and just be like, hey, how's it going? Like if you're in the United States and you walk around with a beer, the police are going to arrest you or at least take your beer away and give you a fine or something.
Why?
So like, because it's illegal to walk around in most states with what they call an open container, meaning walking around in public with alcohol open and drinking it is illegal.
Even though you're not driving?
Yes, even though you're not driving. Yeah.
Why?
I don't know.
Oh.
I think it's just they don't want people to be publicly intoxicated. So this is a crime. And so in fact, a lot of things in China that we take for granted, like the ability to walk around and drink. This is not, I'm not saying everyone, let's go all walk around and drink alcohol. I haven't had alcohol in 9 months, for example. But my point is, like, there's a lot of things that we can do in China that people back in the States cannot do. What is allowed is having guns and some kinds of drugs. And in China, what's allowed are normal things. And I can I can say pretty much whatever I want in China. Maybe I can't carry a sign chanting against something, but the freedom is different. But the freedom that's allowed here in China is normal, healthy, everyday kinds of living your life freedom. And whereas the kinds of freedoms, like freedom to carry around an assault rifle, that shouldn't be normal. That's not a good thing. I don't want to live in a place where you're free to carry like a machine gun in the street.
Right.
What is that?
And also, you know, you were mentioning, you know, in the States, people value so much your right to say whatever you want to say, right? And especially, I think one thing that people are so proud of is you can say terrible things about the government and the president in public and not get into trouble, supposedly. Okay. But the thing is, here in China, like, normal people don't want to do that. You know what I mean? Like, even if you tell people that, hey, you know, we encourage you say bad things about the government and especially the president, I don't think many people will be interested. They will be like,
yeah, you're right. Yeah, exactly. With like the Harvard reporting, 95% of people like the central government. That is not something people are interested in doing.
Yeah. And also not just because, you know, they respect and like the central government because they're so responsible and they hear the people. But also just like in Chinese culture, we don't like open conflicts, right? I'll give you one really simple example that maybe people in the West just simply don't know. You know how election year, right?
Yeah.
You hear debates,
Yeah.
All these debates, and eventually the presidential debate. Now, we think it's a great thing. See two grown adults just saying things about each other, trying to bring the other person down. And in the West, you seem like, okay, that's a shining thing about our system. But here in China, it embarrasses us. Open conflicts embarrasses us. Like, especially for important adult figures, like, you don't bicker in public like that. And also just a whole political campaign about, it's not just, you know, it seems like it's not just about saying good things about yourself, your party. It's also, you know, about saying bad things about the other party.
Yeah.
And we don't like that. Like in this culture, you don't do that, like in public and feel proud about it. So I think I really want Western societies to understand a little bit more. It's not just about politics. It's about the culture, how people like and don't like to do certain things in this culture. We like harmony.
I see what you're saying, and I completely agree with that. The idea of face and other cultural concepts here are very, very, very different. I want to add a couple things as well, though.
Sure.
Like right now, the United States is reeling from people going online and saying extremely irresponsible, very derogatory things, using profanity and even threatening to kill one another.
Gosh.
And I think the United States may be just at a turning point where they realize they need to do something called real name verification, which is like something very popular in like Japan, South Korea, and some other countries around the world, and Europe and stuff. This is where if you're online, in fact, you are you still. So you can't just name yourself the Mad Hatter and then go say a bunch of terrible. I just made that up. You may say a bunch of terrible things about other people and encourage them to kill themselves or something crazy, which they do now. So like it may be in the coming years and decade, there may be a lot more debate about this, because even with the ability to say what, people say whatever they want on the internet, because of the anonymity of not even being you, being whoever you're pretending to be, people are saying grotesque and inhuman things to one another.
They're being irresponsible because they don't feel like they will be held accountable for that.
To account. Exactly.
Wow. We've been talking about like heavy and deep things, but I think these discussions are also helpful. And sometimes it's quite surprising how like other cultures can miss really important things about like other people and cultures, right? Something that's held extremely valuable in one society might not be so welcomed in others. And I think we should, respect that, and that there are so many different ways to live.
Well, I agree, and I want to add to that too. One of China's foreign policies is non-interference in the domestic affairs of other countries. So, like, if China gives a loan to another country, they don't say you need to change your internal policies, which is different from the World Bank and some other institutions where they say no, you need to change your government in X, Y, and Z ways to qualify for this loan. China has a different perspective. They want to help grow the economy of that country and interweave it for the benefit of all people. But, America is constantly like using its giant blowhorn to talk about how China should conduct its internal affairs. The difference is China actually is not interested in telling America how it should conduct its affairs. Yes, Chinese people are sometimes concerned that America is not maybe managing itself in a way that is appropriate. And that's like, oh, that's concerning. But also China is not also at the same time want to wave a finger at America and say, you really need to change your gun laws. So like, the difference is America is constantly actively trying to change other countries' internal affairs around the world, and China is not.
I mean, hopefully we like to think that they're doing this out of goodwill, right? Hoping that at least with good intentions. And also at the same time, I think a lot of practical Chinese people would just ask, like, how do you have the energy to care about so many things and to actually put things into action? Because, I mean, like China, it's a vast country with complicated issues and a large population. To be honest, like if I were responsible for running a country, I've got enough of things to do on our own here, right? I don't think I have enough energy to meddle in other people's affairs. Not that I don't care. I mean, I want the whole world to be peaceful and prosperous, but there's only so much you can do, and you should start with your own house, right? Be peace yourself. And then, spread that peace to other people in other places. But probably, sounds easier said than done. But anyhow, we say all this with good intentions.
Absolutely, with good intentions. There's no, we're not trying to shame any institutions into, but, I just want to add that, it's not just China that, you look around the world, and I said this before, but I think it's really important that there are many, many countries around the world where allowing people to carry guns wherever they want to carry them with is not a normal behavior.
Right.
And given that the United States is one of the only countries in the world that allows people to carry guns around wherever they feel like it, within some kind of scope, and it's the only major country in the world with major gun crime, I think that connecting those dots is something more Americans should do.
Maybe one day, enough people will get together and to solve this problem, because as I mentioned, there are solutions. It's just whether or not we can work together to implement those solutions. So, yeah, Well, sounds like we are important people, huh? Talking about all this. Yeah.
Well, for all of the fans listening, we'll try to have something more light and fun for you next time.
All right. Well, this is an important issue to talk about. But so thank you, our listeners, for your patience, and thank you, Jason.
Thank you,
and
BeiBei.
Yeah, and we'll see you next time.
See you next time.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.